Everyone, welcome. My name's Christine Dacey and I'm the CEO of the Churchill Trust. As I mentioned, we're in Canberra, which is on beautiful Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I'd like to acknowledge the land that we are working and living and learning on here, and also acknowledge that you will be working and living and learning on lands in various parts of Australia. I welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us here today, and would like to assure you of the Trust's ongoing commitment to participation in our program by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Along with Nev Jones, who's on the screen there with me, we're going to give you this information session. I promise it will be over an hour, less if you don't have any questions, but it's designed specifically to give you the information you need. And we're really encouraging you to, I've got a few slides, Nev's got his story, but if you've still got questions, to please pop them in the Q&A. We've also got closed captioning if you need it, so just enable it on your machine. But like all closed captioning, there's a slight delay of a couple of seconds. We also have a lot of frequently asked questions on our website, and we also have a series of animations on our website. So between what we tell you here today, those FAQs and animations, we're really hopeful that we will satisfy all the questions that you might have, and the team will send out a few links to you when we do a wrap up of this information session with you as well. We are recording the session. It's going to be available along with several others on our YouTube channel, and each session is largely the same. Of course, the fellows that we choose to do different sessions are different, but you really will, hopefully get all the answers you need by watching this one. I'm only going to do a couple of slides because I think hearing from Nev and then giving you the chance to ask questions is the best way for us to give you the information we need. I will tell you that we'll try and focus on the questions that will impact the broadest number of you. We have some that are quite common, and so we kind of pick and choose the ones that we think will have the most applicability most broadly. But if you have a kind of a very specific set of circumstances that are a bit narrower, that's fine. We're happy to talk to you offline. Don't worry if you don't hear your question answered today. As I say, we will cut it off at the hour. People have got lives to live. And without any further ado, I might get going onto the slides. First question, what is Churchill Fellowship? So just a little bit about our history. We've been around for 60 years, creating Churchill Fellows. And the fellowship's a really tangible and meaningful living legacy to Sir Winston Churchill, who was one of the greatest characters and leaders in the 20th century. Churchill really believed in the power of public service and the capacity of all individuals to create change. And we think that the fellowship program is a really lovely and wonderful way to bring that belief to life. And we've got a lot of evidence that says that our fellows are doing that day in, day out in their communities. The funding for the program came from everyday Australians who responded to a door knock appeal back in 1965. And we take the responsibility of managing that donor money really seriously. We want to use it to create change, and we want to do it to empower individuals. And we feel really very fortunate to be entrusted with the extraordinary generosity of generations gone past. In terms of fellowship itself, it is basically a unique and life-changing opportunity that is open to all Australians and permanent residents from all backgrounds. It is not an academic scholarship, and it is not a funding grant. It is basically a fellowship payment to you that allows you to explore your vision and to provide you with a means to undertake a journey of learning. We are really committed to people telling us what they are passionate about, why they are passionate about it, and why they are the right people to do some further investigation of that topic by going overseas and talking to other people. You'll see if you go to write an application, It's not a thesis. We don't want a thesis. We can't read 1,000 theses. So we really encourage you to think about what a really well-targeted, well-crafted application looks like. And we've got a sample application on our website as a bit of a guide. Think about what's your project and why you need a fellowship to take it that next step further. And I'm absolutely sure that Nev will have something to talk about in his context when he's talking to you. The idea is that you go overseas for a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 8 weeks on your fellowship journey to observe best practice and build networks that can benefit the industry or community that you are in. And community can be any way you describe it. It could be a local football club, it could be the state of New South Wales, it could be the whole of Australia. It's up to you to tell us what community that you are looking to impact. And like our projects, that's pretty unique to your specific project. Topics can range from anything to, we had someone doing pirate ship restoration. We have ballet dancers, we have neurosurgeons, we have environmentalists, we have young people organising music, we have Indigenous fellows going and talking and learning about truth telling in other Indigenous communities. Really, the scope is really broad, and we really encourage that. We think that's one of the really lovely things about our fellowship. I will also say to you that notwithstanding the fact that you're here in this themed information session, don't let the categories get into your head. Just describe your project and we'll assign you to a theme, because quite often a lot of projects touch on multiple different streams, so don't worry too much about the themes. Of course, should you be successful in being chosen to be a fellow, once you've finished your travel, you will come back and be part of our amazing alumni ecosystem, and there are opportunities that are attached to that as well. And we've got fellows all over the country and in fact all over the world doing amazing things as part of that. We're really proud of the fact that we have supported more than 4,900 Australians the opportunity since 1965 to become a fellow. So the short version of that is 4 to 8 weeks overseas, any topic, tell us why you and what's going on and why you need to go overseas to do it. So just on to the next slide, and how do you apply? And this is kind of the nuts and bolts. So that eligibility piece, it is open to all Australians and permanent residents who are 18 years and older, and there is no upper age limit. I will say that we can offer support if you need it, if you have very specific needs, or if you're, say, living in really remote Australia, we do have some ability to support you. And if you need to talk to us further about that, we're very happy to engage in that conversation with you. And there is a little bit of information in our frequently asked questions about that for you as well. I talked a little bit about your project. It is an individual project. It's not a team project, but we do have a special category called joint fellowships that apply for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. So 2 people could work together on a topic that is focused on Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander projects. So by and large, the vast majority of our fellows are doing individual fellowships on their own. Your project does have to be self-contained, it does have to benefit the Australian community, and it does have to demonstrate that the topic has been fully explored within Australia first. There needs to be a reason for us to invest in you and send you overseas, and you just need to tell us why. We think it's important that we are clear with you up front that the fellowships are an expensive investment in you, your expertise and your ability. And so we want you to be putting your best foot forward when you're telling us why we should be giving it to you. A couple of application tips for you. And that is, tell us why is the project important now, who it will help, and how it will help. In terms of the itinerary, have a think about how long you are choosing to or applying to be away for. We always apply the 70-30 rule to the itinerary. We do not expect it to be perfect when you do your application. I'm sure Nev will have some great insights on this as well. You can't just say, oh, I'm thinking about going to South America. You know, we need it to have some specificity to it and some logic to it. What you can't say to me is that I want to go to Namibia, Botswana, Morocco, and Chad, and then come back if you're selected and say, oh, now I want to go to Montenegro, Croatia, and Italy, right? The assessment panels will be assessing you on the itinerary that they see, even if it's not perfectly nailed down. So be really mindful when you're thinking about your application to be as precise as you can be at this point in the fellowship journey. And I guess the last thing is really super important is why you? Why are you the right person to do this? Really, writing your application will benefit by you being really clear and concise. Try and avoid using jargon and focus on how both you as a person and your project will benefit your community and bring about meaningful change. I am reliably informed that the character limit on the application form is a significant first up challenge. And I'm also told that a character limit is different to a word limit. So every full stop, every comma, every space needs to be accounted for. So do it in Word or do it somewhere else before you start doing it in the form. I'll also say to you, think about it's not only your passion and commitment to the project, but one of the big things we're looking for is, and what are you going to do with it when you get back? What's your ability to do something with that? So it's you as a person, your project, and then, you're thinking about, well, when I get back, what does that look like? Nev's going to talk to you about a few things, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to do some questions and answers. But I will just take a couple up front because we get asked them in every session. How much is a fellowship worth? The answer is last year on average, it was $37,900, and our fellows tell us that that is a really good amount of money for them to do what they need to do. I stress that's an average, so there's differences between, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 week fellowships, and we will work all that through with you if you're lucky enough to be selected. The expenses that it covers are your airfare, your accommodation, your meals, and other travel expenses that we will agree with you before you go. I will also let you know that just putting in a bunch of conferences and conference registrations is not going to make a compelling case. You might go to one, but that is the sort of thing, that sort of networking is not what the fellowship's about. It's about an immersive experience. It's about really talking to people, and particularly in a really organic way. So don't focus just on conferences. Do I need qualifications? The answer is absolutely no. And a final word on sponsored fellowships. For some of you, you may well end up getting a sponsored fellowship. Sponsored fellowships are just named fellowships from people who have very generously left us money. Don't worry about it. The application form will ask you to identify if you want to apply for a sponsored fellowship. Do it or don't. It won't rule you out. It won't rule you in. And we will do all the work behind the scenes if that's kind of where you land. Don't get distracted or worried about it. I'm going to wrap up by just saying, I'm sure you want to hear from Nev. I'm going to put the application open and close dates up on the screen. So 9 a.m. the 27th of February is when we open, and 5 p.m. on the 30th of April is when we close. You'd be amazed at what a whirling dervish of activity the 29th and 30th of April tend to be. We're all just people and we can tend to leave things to the last minute. I would encourage you not to do that. But at a minimum, you will need to have any referees that you nominate into us 48 hours before that closing time. And I can talk to you more about referees on the way through. The trust team and I are here to support you. We do have an incredible amount of information on our website. We're a pretty small organisation, and so we do ask you to self-service as much as possible. If you go to our churchilltrust.com.au, you'll see a tab saying Become a Fellow. All the FAQs, all the information that I've just spoken to you about is all listed down there. And I'm going to stop talking now and hand you over to Nev so that he can talk you through a bit of his journey, and then the two of us can have a go at any questions you throw away. Over to you, Nev.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everyone. I guess I'll just start with providing just a brief background to me. So I'm a 2024 Churchill Fellow. I did my travel last year, about mid last year, and I had my report submitted from memory, about August or September last year. So fairly recent Churchill Fellow. My project, well, I should explain who I am first. I'm a psychologist, I'm a veteran. I do some woodworking activities as well, and I run a social enterprise called Halcyon Woodcraft, where we deliver evidence-based, well-being centric craft programs for veterans and first responders. My fellowship was around investigating the mental health benefits of green woodworking for veterans, but specifically in therapeutic settings where I work. And I travelled over 8 weeks. I really sort of squeezed as much as I could into the 8 weeks, and I travelled to Japan, US, England, Sweden, Latvia, and then Scotland over that time. I met with pretty diverse stakeholders, to be honest, from professional woodworkers through to veteran charities, researchers, academic types, and any other stakeholders that sort of popped up opportunistically along the way. So that was my project. You can read my report. It's on the Churchill Trust website. But I wanted to really sort of focus what I talk about on the application process, like the lead up to actually departing on the fellowship. Can I just say right up front is that I can't really talk about the Churchill Trust decision-making processes and policy and things like that. That's out of my lane. I'll defer those sort of questions to Chris. But what I can and want to talk about is my perspective, and that is my mindset and approach and attitude towards the application process. I was lucky in that I was picked up in my first application. Many people sort of apply a second or third time, etc. I was lucky I got picked up in my first time, so I guess I did something right. So you can sort of take what I say and and my perspective, but I do highlight that it's just my perspective on this. So what led me to the applying for the Churchill Fellowship is, as a psychologist, I work with veterans, and I find myself sitting in a conventional therapy room like where I'm sitting right now, sitting face to face with veterans. People would often feel pretty uncomfortable in this sort of setting, and I found myself introducing basic handcraft activities to break down barriers and improve connection with people. I was doing some basic wood carving activities. This was really successful. Over a period of time, that migrated outdoors, and ultimately this evolved into me sort of establishing the social enterprise that I run now. In about 2024, it was early 2024, I was finding myself a little frustrated with the system that I work in, the constraints around the Department of Veterans Affairs, policy and structures around how we deliver mental health support, and by extension, the Medicare system as well, because, I knew that what I was doing was highly effective and often much more effective than sitting in a room with someone. And yet I was constrained by some of the policy architecture that we work in. So I was really sort of committed to finding or to sort of broadening the way that we, as in, stakeholders, sort of think about this problem set. And coincidentally, the Royal Commission interim report into veteran and defence suicide was released about that time. So it was really an opportunity for me to springboard off that and really sort of start, agitating and making some change in this field. And I'll sort of focus on the Churchill Fellowship part of this, but I was doing some. It was about March probably, and I note that the cutoff for applications is about April. But in about March 2024, I was doing some research into craft therapy models around the place, and I stumbled across this YouTube video by a blacksmith called Tim Bignell, and he was a 2013 Churchill Fellow. And my point of reference for Churchill Fellowships up until that point, was what I experienced through my 20 years in the army, and that was the sort of geopolitical, strategic, social change type issues. And I thought I was wrongly under the assumption that fellowships were all about this stuff. And here I was coming across this artisan who did a fellowship on a really sort of interesting and meaningful topic in the category of arts. And that was really sort of an eye-opener for me. So I did some more investigating and reading and research into the Churchill Fellowship, and it really sort of occurred to me that the Churchill Fellowship would be a really good sort of opportunity for me to propel me towards what I wanted to achieve. Noting the time frame at that stage, I only had about 4 weeks to apply. So, I'm not those people that have to be honest, I've always dreamed to do a Churchill Fellowship. I arrived pretty late at the party, to be honest. So I had a sort of fairly short time period to think about it, to clarify my thinking, to refine my focus, and of course, go through the application process. I was sitting, of all things, I was sitting on a Friday afternoon in a pub with my wife talking over these very issues. One of the biggest initial obstacles I had was this imposter syndrome thing, right, which all fellows talk about, where, I was contemplating why would the Churchill Trust, why would anyone be interested in this micro sort of issue that I am sort of focused on at the moment. It's a very niche issue. And that sort of imposter syndrome sort of sat with me throughout the application process, and it really didn't sort of wane up until the onboarding event at the end of the year, where I realised that I was sitting in a room with about 100 other Churchill Fellowship recipients who all had these niche projects and were all experiencing that imposter syndrome. But collectively, the power and energy of that 100 people, I realised, was having a broad influence on many parts of Australian society. And it was at that point that I came to terms with that imposter syndrome. But anyway, I was sitting at that pub with my wife one day, and we decided, yep, I'm going to put in this application right now. And we drafted it literally on the spot just then. I'm very fortunate that my wife's a high school English teacher. So after drafting it, we went back and forwards for a while. Chris mentioned the character limits on the application. I'll move forward and talk about the written application process now first. I'll talk through actually a couple of challenges that I had with it, or a couple of things that I grappled with. The first one, Chris mentioned this as well, is that I was trying to wrap my head around about whether my project fit into the public service and emergency response area, or the arts and trades, or the health and medicine. And with the benefit of hindsight now, I spent too much time worrying and thinking about that, when the reality is the guys at the Churchill Trust made that happen for me. And in hindsight, I should have focused more of my attention on the actual project, not trying to make the project fit into, a certain pigeonhole. So that's the first bit of advice I would give potential applicants, is don't get caught up on trying to pigeonhole yourself. It's about your project. It's about being passionate about what you do, as opposed to trying to make that fit into the system. The second bit I wanted to sort of highlight is that is around dissemination of the information, and a takeaway that I have from the application process is the importance of the dissemination of your findings. It's something which came up repeatedly throughout the whole selection process. It was about being absolutely clear with how you intend to use the findings of your project. If your project is overly self-indulgent, and the learnings and knowledge that you accumulate and the experiences, if it's just going to sit in your memory or in your photo album somewhere, then it's probably not really sort of suitable to what we want to get out of a Churchill Fellowship. It's really about that dissemination phase, and what are you going to do with that information to affect change. So I'd encourage potential applicants to really have that clear in your mind right from the outset. Even though you're not in that stage yet, it's really important to think about that right through from the start when you're thinking about your project. My next point is I want to pick up on that what Chris mentioned about the character limitations with the written application, and to me it's a double-edged sword. At some points it can be really sort of frustrating, because you have so many big ideas and so much you want to do, to limit it into certain character counts, and I can't remember what the numbers are off the top of my head. But in saying that, I've walked away from the experience thinking it's an absolutely wonderful thing, because what it did is it didn't allow me, it forced me to refine my thinking and my focus, and to shed off those ideas that were on the peripheries that are less important, and get a pencil beam focus on what is important and what you want to do with your fellowship. It's actually a really useful exercise, and I'd actually encourage, and I know there's only a 10% success rate in applications, but I reckon 100% of people, maybe I'm speculating a little bit, but everybody that goes through this application process has the ability to benefit from the process, because even if you're not successful, it will help you clarify your thinking about the topic that you're about. So it's a worthwhile process in pursuing. And I guess that what comes with that is that words matter. I have this philosophy, and I use this in my therapy all the time, and that's that words matter. The words that you select matter because it influences your thinking, it influences the outcomes of your product and your research and how you disseminate it. So you're getting your patter down or your elevator pitch, whatever you want to call it, getting that down, getting that down early on in the process through the application process is going to serve you well, not only throughout the selection process, but on your journey as well through the fellowship and also through the dissemination phase. Because I found myself, once I had that sort of that pitch, that brief pitch of your project down, I don't know how many times I repeated that, countless times throughout not only the application process, but when you're meeting with people on the fellowship, and even now, sort of, nearly a year after the fellowship, explaining it to people. So getting it down as early as you can is pretty handy. And the final thing I wanted to talk about with the written application is that I'd encourage applicants to find somebody who's a good communicator in your life as well. Like I said, I was fortunate. I'm married to a high school English teacher, which is really wonderful. So getting somebody who is good with words that can help you edit it. And I'd also, probably with the benefit of hindsight, recommend finding somebody who actually doesn't have a dog in the fight, in your particular fight, who's not particularly immersed in your particular topic. And having that neutrality can help, because it can help to vet it, to make sure that you're not using jargon, and to make sure that that the communication is effective when you're trying to sell it to people who don't have a background in what you're talking about. Because when you're so passionate about a particular topic, it's easy to assume that everyone else knows what you're talking about. So having somebody who can vet your written application, who doesn't know about what you're talking about, can be really handy. I want to touch on the references as well, because I walked away from the application experience and doing the research. I assumed, and I think I assumed correctly, that the referees and the references were a really important part of the application process. And in fact, I think it was explicitly stated somewhere how important it was. The first thing I'd say is that the referee guide that's available on the Churchill Trust website is excellent. It is a really phenomenal document to provide to your referees, and yourself for that matter. It clearly articulates what referees should talk about. Now, obviously, there's a professional and a personal referee that you need to approach. I would recommend approaching these referees as early as humanly possible. In my case, as I said, I left my application reasonably late. So what I did is I approached those referees straight away, even before I had my sort of final draft of the application submitted, because I wanted to give them as much notice as possible. With the referee guide as almost a template, I provided talking points to my referees. I chose to, with the referees, you need a personal and professional referee. I sort of added another layer to that, I suppose, and this is just on me. I wanted one referee that could talk about the technical aspects of my project, as well as me, but I also wanted somebody who is of reputable status in the community as well. So in my case, I picked another psychologist who had a lot of technical experience in the field that I was applying for. But then my other referee was a brigadier general, actually, in the army. So they could fit that. They fitted the requirements of the referee, a personal and a professional referee. But overlapped on top of that is that there was a high profile guy and there was a technical expert. So we could sort of cover all bases with those referee reports. And as I said, I gave them a few talking points and evidence as to how I met the criteria for what the Churchill Trust were looking for. So really important. The referees, I didn't vet, or you can't. In fact, you can't vet with the referees, right? Because they fill out an automatic form that's emailed to them. But both my referees provided exceptionally good references, which I'm very grateful for. And I guess it's a courtesy thing to sort of close out on the referee thing is it's important, I believe, to close the loop with them as well, because they don't hear anything after that point, after they submit their references. It's quite a burden on them to write them. So, I think it's a good idea to close the loop, let them know how you go with the application, let them know how you go with the fellowship. And I know both of my referees are really excited about, how it goes or how it's gone. And yeah, it's sort of made a really good relationship with them.
Hey, Neb, can I just put in on referees? Pick people who actually know you. Like there's this kind of fine balance, right, between I'll pick the most famous person I know or the heaviest hitter in my topic and, We had someone apply in a year gone by who got an ex-prime minister to be their referee, but it was pretty clear that the ex-prime minister might have met this person once or twice. So you've
Yeah.
got to get that calibration right. Your referees really are important, so make sure you do yourself a favor by picking the ones who can actually talk about you.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I should have, maybe I didn't articulate that clear enough, but that's obviously the priority is people can talk to the terms. It was just sort of, I was fortunate that I could select a couple of people that could tick a couple of boxes there.
Yeah.
Now the other part of the written application is actually the video pitch that
Ah, perfect.
that you have to submit as well. Again, with the benefit of hindsight, I probably overthought that a little bit, and what I mean by that is that it's a small, very short period of time, a very condensed sort of video. I can only imagine from the Churchill Trust perspective that it's pretty important because they get to see you and get a feel for you, but I was getting hung up on technology because I'm not good with technology, and scripting everything that I was going to say to the point where, in hindsight, I probably cringe a little bit at the video I submitted because it was a little sort of too robotic than I would like. It's a really important thing, but really, I go back to that point I was making before about getting your pitch sorted so you can speak about your pitch confidently. And another bit of advice I'd give to that as well is given it's such a brief amount of time you have there, have a think about some of the non-verbal ways you can communicate your project as well. And what I'm talking about is consider how you're dressed, consider what's in the background of your video, try to convey some of those sort of non-verbal environmental cues to help get across the feel for what you're trying to communicate as well. So I think that can help with that.
And I can confirm the video is super important when you've got over 1,000 to
Yeah.
do a big initial shortlisting process. I will say that the video sort of times out at about 58 seconds. So, you know, that every second counts, and Nev's so right. Don't do a handstand and, be juggling balls or anything, but the ones that are most memorable, where people have really kind of taken a bit of thought about how they compose it and what their key messages and things like that. Again, it's another way to practice your elevator pitch.
Absolutely, yeah. A great skill, I have to say, as well, for to practice things that you'll be doing throughout the fellowship, and verbally communicating and stuff like that as well. Yeah. Now, I wanted to. I appreciate that. I don't want to talk too long because I want to sort of probably focus on the Q&A. But I did want to talk about the interview side of things as well. So after going through that sort of the initial screening, I'm not sure if that's the right word, of the written applications, there's the interview process. After a nervous couple of months or whatever it is, wondering how you go. But the interview process, the first thing I'd say with that is it can sound daunting, but I would say the Churchill Trust and everybody that works there, every single person, previous fellows, staff there at the Trust are so warm and welcoming and supportive that it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I know a lot of people can get a bit, anxious and rightfully so wound up about the experience. But I just sort of want to break that down a little bit if I can by just sort of highlighting how wonderful and enriching the experience is, because there's just some wonderful human beings out there at the Churchill Trust and other fellows as well. So the interview process is managed by the respective state branches, if that's the right word. So for me, it was in Queensland up here. It was an incredibly slick process, the interview day, very well managed, and a very wonderful sort of experience. There was I don't know how many applicants there were. It felt like there was hundreds. There was like just back-to-back applicants all day long. There were only 15-minute interviews, which maybe sounds reasonable, but in all honesty, it felt like 5 minutes once you were in the room. Obviously, there's some waiting and shuffling through on the day. You're met by various Churchill fellows over the years of different generations along the way who were very supportive and gave advice along the way throughout the day. When you went into the actual room, you can expect to be sitting at a table with, I don't know, 10 or 15 former Churchill fellows of a really sort of diverse and eclectic sort of background. Some may know what your topic is, some may not. And all of that, again, is wonderful. And you walk in there and you think like, oh my Lord, this can be quite intimidating. But it's actually, again, I go back to that point that it's a very supportive process. And I think it's important not to necessarily like a job interview as such. It's not that sort of power dynamic. It's much more supportive of that. And again, I go back to your elevator. It's really important to be able to get that across in that 15 minutes. It's important to remind yourself that you are the expert on this topic. There's nobody else in that room, and there's a hell of a lot of life experience and Churchill Fellowship experience in that room, but you are the expert on your topic, and that is okay. That's a good thing, so you're informing them about the topic as well, and as well as selling it, but really sort of highlighting the importance of the topic and helping them understand the importance of it. I've spoken to a couple of people who have been thinking about Churchill Fellowships since then, and a couple of questions I get is around the interview and what sort of things do you say and how do you promote yourself and things like that. And I guess and again, this is my own experience, right? But what I would say is that it should be about your project. It's about your project and how it benefits society, why you're the right person for it. So it's less like a job interview where you're talking yourself up and things like that. But the emphasis is more around the project and the benefit of that. So I'd maybe sort of consider that, I guess, in the way that you communicate that. Something that sort of took me it almost sort of took me a bit aback in the interview process, actually. And I remember this vividly. It's the one question that I really vividly remember is somebody asked me on the panel, they said, how can the Churchill Trust support you? And the reason it took me back, that question, is like, oh, holy moly, I thought I was in here justifying what I'm doing. And you're saying, how can you help me? And I had to sort of pause on that for a moment to actually give that some thought, because I hadn't really sort of considered that sort of more, generous approach and things like that. And I ended up talking about the credibility that a Churchill Fellowship can bring, and being able to do this project under the banner as a Churchill Trust opens doors that would otherwise not be available, and the reputation that brings. So, yeah, so that was actually, I found that to be a pretty powerful question to be asked of me. Yeah.
All of those are very lovely things. I'm going to give you some of the harder edged things. It's very nice. But there are a couple of things that we require of our fellows. And this is why we talk to you like we do now about, is this the right time in your life to do this? The whole ethos, right, of the fellowship is that there is enormous value in human being to human being interaction. We don't let people do their interviews by Zoom, because we're investing a lot of money to send you overseas so that you can do human being to human being immersion and talking with the people that you want to talk to. So I would really encourage you to have a look at the dates on our website of when your interview panel will be happening. In the bigger states like New South Wales and Victoria, it's a two-step process. There's actually kind of a sub-panel who will interview you initially, and those panels are fully staffed by people who are experts in that topic area. And then the final panel is like that cross-cutting group of people that Nev was talking about. Those final interviews have to be face-to-face. So again, have a look at the dates. The other thing that is mandatory and in person, if you are selected, is we prepare you for your overseas travel by bringing you to Canberra, the entire cohort, and that's called our onboarding session. And Nev, you would have been one of the early ones that we onboarded, but it gets better and better every year. And we pick about 100 fellows a year, and it really is the most extraordinary energy and buzz in that room. You're smiling. I hope that's a good recollection for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is mandatory. And unfortunately, last year, 5 people said, oh, I can't get to onboarding. And we just had to say, well, then you can't do your fellowship. So there are some commitments that we require of you in terms of time. And we don't underestimate how busy and complicated and messy everyone's life is, whether it's aged parents, young children, much loved pets, PhDs that you've been trying to get to, life. And so have a think about, because really it's pretty much a 2-year process, right? From the date of this information session to writing your application, having your interview. If you're selected, you'll be told in September, you'll be onboarded in October, and then you have about 15 months to do your travel, and then you come back and you have to write your report. When I say write your report, let me be clear. We actually do take reports in a variety of formats, so podcasts, blogs, all sorts of things. But, all in, it's a good 2-year kind of thing. And pick the moment in your life where it's going to make most sense for you. There's been many cases where people have been to these information sessions and thought, okay, probably 2026 is not the year for me. I need a bit more time to kind of get my ducks in a row. That's fine. We've been around for 60 years. We're not going anywhere. But if it is the year for you, and you might have been to some of these information sessions in prior years, but we are really committed to setting people up for success. And that means that we require some human being to human being interaction with you along the way. And that last little piece about the report when you get back, it is a significant financial investment, and we need to know who you talk to, where you went, what sorts of things you learned, and how you're planning on using them. And we are being very flexible about it. We really don't want the prospect of having to write a report to be the thing that stops you from applying. Not everyone's, a university graduate, and just don't let that be the barrier. Back your ability to tell your story in a way that makes sense to you, and we'll back you in as well. And be under no illusions that actually you probably can do it. Like, everyone's got a story to tell, and we don't want you to rule yourself out at the first step. I'm a little surprised. I normally, by this stage in the session, have been asked 3 or 4 different times, can I take my family with me if I'm selected? And I kind of love the fact that no one's asked me, but I feel like I should tackle it because it really is one of the very common ones we ask. Nev, what was your approach to this one?
So I did not take my family with me. For me, it was an immersive experience. It was important, and I guess it gets at that whole sort of human to human thing. That whole process is a very human thing, and it was so important for me to immerse myself in what I was doing on one level, to be 100% focused on that without the distractions of life and work and other things. So that's one side of things. And the other side of things is the flexibility. Being by myself, there's an element of being dynamic that you sort of need as well, because you have to be dynamic, because you're meeting with different people, different organizations. Some meetings come off inevitably, some meetings don't come off. So you need to be agile enough, which can be a bit challenging with family. So for me, it was a pretty simple decision, and that was that I was going to leave my family at home. But in saying that, my wife did use the opportunity as almost like a parallel holiday, and we met up in Sweden for a couple of days, towards the end of my trip. But it was very much an independent trip. That was my approach.
Yeah. And yet we've had other people who have traveled with family. We're not the family police. We can't stop you at the border taking your family. And for some people, it's really, really important that they have someone traveling with them, even if it's a friend or a logistics manager. Just understand that if you do that, that's at your cost. We're funding your fellowship, not a family fellowship or a family holiday even. And be aware of what Nev said. Like, it does fundamentally change what your experience will be. And we understand that for some people, the idea of being on their own for 6 or 8 weeks overseas would be really a barrier. So again, think about your circumstances and what works for you. A lot of the ways we try and encourage people is get your family to come and meet you at the end if that's what you want to do. And the other thing is, not everyone can afford to pay that extra to have someone come and be with them or come and meet them. And so we're really conscious of that as well. So horses for courses on that one.
Absolutely. And I would 100% agree with that. And, everyone's situation's different, and circumstances are different, and life experiences are different. So you have to do what works for you. Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with. But I would say, don't be, from my own experience, don't feel guilty about, if you decide to leave your family at home and things like that. Just get to wherever you have to get to make the right decision for you.
Yeah. Hey, Nev, there's a question here about how fellows manage their energy levels and build in downtime. I've got some thoughts,
Yeah.
but I'd be interested to hear yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, throughout the whole process, the guys at the Churchill Trust will encourage you to build some, to not overcommit yourself, not overbook yourself on the fellowship travels. For me, what I did is that I am a keen hiker, being outdoors, and I was traveling to some places that had some magical hikes. So I in each of the countries that I stopped in, I made sure that I built in a sort of day-long hike in each of those locations as an opportunity to consolidate my thoughts, to process the way I think and feel about stuff. So that worked for me, but it is so important to have those days built in, and programmed into your calendar, because it's so easy to overcommit yourself, I suppose. So that time is important. 8 weeks, 8 weeks is not a long time in a lifetime, but it's a long time to be on the road. So, it's longer than your average holiday. So you need to have that recharge time.
And some simple things like, book yourself into an Airbnb with a laundry and a kitchen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we hear legendary stories about people who come home with, haven't done a load of laundry. The tendency is for people to get terribly excited and to just try and cram absolutely everything they can. And we won't actually let you do that. We've got a fellowship liaison person here who'll work with you on your itinerary, because we're all human beings who need periods of respite, particularly some of the topics that people deal with. They absolutely need time to kind of calibrate in their heads what's going on. You're allowed to look at the Colosseum if you're in Rome. That's okay. We don't require you to be going 24/7. And we trust our fellows. We work in a high trust environment that you will understand and take the responsibility very seriously. So we will work through that with you. We also know it's very common that when people come back, their life here hasn't stopped, and they have that like deer in the headlights moment where they come back and they're on a high, and then they've got, life admin to deal with, and they've got a report to somehow get done. And so think about that in terms of managing your energy as well. So, and I really encourage people write notes along the way. We're okay with you using AI. I was over in London meeting with my trust colleagues there, and I took notes every day. And I got an 80% product at the end of the day, or a 75% product at the end of the day. So when I came back and was writing mine up, I kind of only had to do it. And you can pre-populate so much of what you write, like, where you're going, who you're going to be talking to. Like, you can actually get a head start at the beginning of the thing when you're kind of fresh and energized.
Yeah, absolutely. I found with my experience, I had an idea of what I wanted my report to look like even before I departed, just an idea of the structure in a broad sense. But as I was going, I had a couple of ways of tracking, keeping a record of that information. I was taking notes in a notebook. I was using what do you call them? Voice messages, voice notes, whatever you call it. So just recording the meetings that I had and then transcribing those. I actually found those were invaluable when it came time to write the report. And then I was trying to chip away on the report as I went, to mixed success, I have to say, because some days you're just brain dead at the end of the day and you can't write. So other times you knock out a fair bit, but but I still had a fair bit to do when I got back. And that's, for me, how I managed that was that I just blocked out. I'm fortunate in that I'm self-employed, but I blocked out a week of my time after I got back. So I made it a 9-week commitment, not an 8-week commitment. So that week when I got back, my single focus in life was getting that report done. So that's how I approached it anyway. Everyone's different.
Yeah. Hey, Nev, there's a question here that I think you would be having to answer, not me. In your experience, what do you feel is a common missed opportunity in the research phase of your project? I imagine it's pretty unique, right?
Yeah, it's probably,
Yours would be
pretty.
different to other ones, and
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. I'll talk about my specific thing, the missed opportunities for me, and it's something that I still kick myself about, and that is the nature of my project. I was looking at this thing about woodworking, but this thing about mental health, and this thing about research, and they're all very different people that are involved in that field. So I travelled in the Northern Hemisphere summer, so about mid-year last year. And the reason that I chose to go in that window in summer is because there was a lot of events on, a lot of well-being events and woodworking events, and the woodworking community, outdoor community, is very active in that at that time. But the trouble is that's when the academic community are all on summer holidays as well. So I found it quite difficult to access both. So I had a couple of people that I really wanted to meet with, that I was corresponding with beforehand, but then I just couldn't make it line up because of the summer holidays over there with the universities and things like that. But in hindsight, I'm okay with that because we've got this thing called the internet. We can still sort of keep in touch and still do. But it was just a trade-off. You can't have in my opinion, you can't have a perfect itinerary. It doesn't matter what your project is. There has to be compromise. So there'll always be something you miss out on. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that was my experience with what I missed.
And I suspect there'd be 100 different answers every year to that.
Yeah.
It's just every fellowship is just completely different, and pretty much that's what we love about it. Now, we've got about like 5 minutes to go. I think we've only got one more question sort of being dealt with in the Q&A piece. I'm going to do a final shout out. If you've got something that you want to ask us, now's the time to pop it in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to release you to the wilds of your dinner, your gym class, your family, your evening walk with your dog. I will say to you, though, there are alumni associations in every state and territory, the Churchill Fellows Associations, and they're really great people. And if you really wanted to talk to a fellow, they're not a bad first up place to go have a chat and see if someone might be able to connect you. Can't make any promises, but they're pretty great people. And we would love it if you would think about applying for our program. As I said, the numbers, it's a pretty competitive thing, but doesn't have to be this year. We're going to be here forever. And I'd really like to thank Nev for your time this evening and encourage everyone to have a go. There's a few more questions. Oh my God, that call for final questions has just sparked a frenzy.
I've got time, Chris. That's all right.
Hang on. I'm going to try and get through as many of these as I can. How do you manage logistics? We'll help you. You will come up with your draft itinerary. But if you are selected our fellowship liaison person, and we have an outsourced travel provider who will help you with flights, but you need to do all of your internal logistics. You can apply more than once if you're unsuccessful. If you're unsuccessful the first time, there's no barrier on you reapplying. And other examples of fellows who began with a narrow professional group and later scaled up or adapted? Yes, there is. And in fact, we've had fellows do all sorts of things like that. They've gone broader when they got back. Your itinerary is up to you, but it has to be a minimum of 4 weeks. So have a think about that. We cannot use fellowships for domestic travel. The whole point of our fellowship program is that you go overseas. If you want to do domestic travel, there might be another fellowship program that kind of suits you better. For applicants already piloting work in Australia, what language best helps distinguish proof of concept, business, or program development? I'm just going to be really blunt about this. We're not about getting your business up and running. Your business might be an adjunct to the work you are doing. We're about benefiting the community. So you would need to articulate that to the panel. Yes, we pay for interpreters if they are required. Yes, you need visas in each place you visit, and you are responsible for getting your visas. I've really tried to just knock a whole bunch of things off there.
Well done, Chris. That was good. Rapid fire.
Yeah. Rapid fire. I feel like I was on the chase.
Yeah.
All right, folks. It is 6:58 in Canberra. Going, gone. Thanks, Nev.
No worries.
Good day, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
Chris.
night. See ya.
See ya.